Welcome to the Test Security for the Texas Assessment Program Training module. In this module, we will review the following topics: test security and confidentiality, procedural testing irregularities, serious testing violations, active monitoring, training summary, training quiz. Please note that at the end of this training module, there will be questions on the content you viewed. You may use the controls on the player to pause content or review sections. Section 1. Test security and confidentiality. Maintaining the security and confidentiality of the Texas Assessment Program is critical for ensuring fair and equal testing opportunities for all Texas students. Given the many uses of student performance data and the need to assure educators, parents, students, and the public that test results are meaningful and valid, it is imperative that all individuals participating in the Texas Assessment Program preserve the integrity of test content and student data. This training will provide an overview of test security measures, but please be aware that it does not take the place of reading the appropriate manuals. Before testing, review the appropriate test administrator manual in the district and campus coordinator resources for further information. All students should have an equal opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge. It is therefore critical for district personnel participating in the Texas Assessment Program to provide the most secure, appropriate, and fair assessment experience for Texas students. All testing personnel should be trained in test security and administration procedures. Annual training is highly recommended as there is often updated policies and procedures. Testing personnel are responsible for being up to date and fully knowledgeable about all test security measures. For additional details on test security, refer to the Test Security section in the District and Campus Coordinator resources and the Test Administrator manuals. All district and campus personnel who participate in state-mandated testing or handle or have access to secure test materials must be trained in test security and administration procedures and sign an oath of test security and confidentiality. Any person who has more than one testing role, such as a district testing coordinator who also serves as a test administrator, must receive appropriate training and sign a test security oath for each role. Test security oaths are valid for the entire school year, including fall, spring, and summer testing, as well as any field testing, mandatory sampling, and optional testing conducted during this time period. Test security oaths are required to be maintained by the district for a period of 5 years. The test security oath is a fillable PDF that can be printed or saved electronically. It is required to be completed after receiving training, if applicable, and before handling secure test materials. Keep in mind that a certified staff member must be identified who will be responsible for each non-certified participant. The State of Texas Assessment of Academic Readiness, or STAR, STAR Alternate 2, Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System, or TELPAS, and TELPAS Alternate are part of the secure testing program, and the contents of these tests, including student information used or obtained in their administration, are confidential. Secure material includes online assessments, online session IDs, test booklets, secure test instructions, STAR Alternate 2 image cards and scoring documents, TELPAS and TELPAS Alternate holistic ratings, TELPAS calibration activities. Procedural testing irregularities are less severe, more common, and typically the result of minor deviations in testing procedures. The best way to avoid procedural irregularities is through routine training with testing personnel. Accommodation errors involve providing appropriate accommodations or designated supports to ineligible students, or not providing appropriate accommodations or designated supports to eligible students. Accounting errors involve late, lost, or missing materials, failure to maintain the security of the materials, or improperly accounting for students' tests, responses, or results. Eligibility errors involve administering the incorrect test to a student, not testing an eligible student, or testing an ineligible student. Monitoring errors are some of the most common types of testing irregularities. They involve improper conduct, such as leaving students unattended while testing, reinforcing test-taking strategies, or not providing the appropriate test materials. For example, a dictionary for reading language arts tests, or a calculator for some math tests. As it is the most common testing irregularity, be sure to review all examples of monitoring errors in the coordinator resources. We will review proper active monitoring later in this training. Training errors involve mistakes in training, calibration, or security oaths. This may include allowing personnel to administer tests, monitor test sessions, or handle secure materials, even though they were not properly trained or did not sign a test security oath. Many procedural testing irregularities, when identified in a timely manner, can be resolved with minimal impact to students. Testing personnel should immediately notify their campus coordinator if they discover a testing irregularity. The procedural testing irregularity form is available in TIDE under Administration and Security Forms. Section 3. Serious Testing Violations. Maintaining test security involves acting responsibly to protect the confidentiality of the state assessments and ensuring proper administration to all students. Conduct that violates the security and confidentiality of a test and is considered a serious testing violation includes directly or indirectly assisting students with responses to test questions, tampering with student responses, falsifying holistic ratings or student responses, viewing secure test content before, during, or after a test administration unless specifically authorized by the Texas Education Agency, or TEA, or by the procedures outlined in the test administration manuals, discussing or disclosing secure test content or student responses, scoring student tests either formally or informally, duplicating, recording, or electronically capturing confidential test content unless specifically authorized by TEA or by the procedures outlined in the test administration manuals, responding to secure test questions, fraudulently exempting or preventing a student from participating in the administration of a required state assessment, encouraging or assisting an individual to engage in the conduct described in the items listed above or in any other serious violation of security and confidentiality, failing to report to an appropriate authority that an individual has engaged in or is suspected of engaging in conduct described in the items listed above or in any other serious violation of security and confidentiality, failing to implement sufficient procedures to prevent student cheating, and failing to implement sufficient procedures to prevent alteration of test documents by anyone other than the student. Testing personnel should be aware that falsifying information includes modifying students' ratings or responses that are transcribed into the data entry interface. The most common examples of serious violations are viewing and duplicating secure test content, direct and indirect assistance including during rater calibration activities, tampering and falsifying. Viewing and duplicating secure test content is a serious testing violation. Examples of this include viewing secure test content before, during, or after an administration, and duplicating, recording, or electronically capturing confidential test content. This includes, but is not limited to, taking photocopies, pictures, screenshots, and recordings. Posting, emailing, or distributing confidential test content is also not allowed. Any action to view or duplicate secure test content is prohibited unless specifically authorized by TEA or by the procedures outlined in the test administration manuals. Another common example of a serious testing violation is direct and indirect assistance. Providing answers, assistance, suggestions, hints, or affirmations is strictly prohibited. You should avoid even the appearance that you are assisting, such as passing out candy or notes during testing, or whispering in students' ear. Previous examples of assistance include, but are not limited to, smiling, frowning, nodding, shaking your head, or tapping on a student's shoulder or desk to indicate a student's response is correct or incorrect. Tampering with or falsifying student responses or holistic ratings is a serious testing violation. This includes changing student responses in a test booklet, on a scoring document, or while entering responses in DEI. When entering a student's response to an open-ended item, the authorized district staff member must enter the response into DEI verbatim. The authorized staff member must not change misspelled words, punctuation, or decimals. TELPAS holistic ratings and TELPAS alternate observable behaviors must be accurately recorded and entered into DEI by authorized district staff members. Authorized staff members who enter student responses and ratings into DEI must sign a specific part of an oath of test security and confidentiality. All testing personnel who handle test materials should be aware that the materials may contain secure test content and that any viewing, discussing, or recording of this confidential information is strictly prohibited. Test administrators who have permission to view secure content in order to provide an approved designated support or as part of a program-specific test administration process must be reminded that responding to test questions, recording the information they see, scoring a test, or discussing the content of a test at any time is strictly prohibited. Any alleged or suspected testing irregularities falling under this category of a serious violation must be reported to the TEA Student Assessment Division as soon as the district testing coordinator is made aware of the incident. Testing personnel should contact TEA if they are unsure whether an irregularity has occurred or if they are unclear regarding what constitutes a serious violation. Testing irregularities can have a significant impact on other people and affect other areas which include, but are not limited to, unexpected or invalid test results, nullification of tests, loss of testing opportunities, breaches in confidentiality and compromised test content, and implications for campus or district accountability ratings. Testing irregularities and violations can affect the validity and reliability of the Texas Assessment Program. Therefore, there are consequences for any testing personnel who is found to have violated the confidentiality or security of an assessment. The potential consequences of testing violations are referral to SBEC for potential sanctions, example, a restriction, reprimand, suspension, or revocation with a minimum 1-year suspension. Class C misdemeanor conviction, student test results being invalidated, lowered accreditation status or accountability rating, charter sanction or revocation. Some previous cases include 1-year suspension for providing students direct and indirect assistance, 2-year suspension for reviewing student test responses, identifying incorrect answers, directing students to rework test items, and providing clues, and revocation for helping students solve problems and using voice inflection and facial expressions during an oral administration. Section 4. Active monitoring. It is important that testing personnel actively monitor all testing situations to maintain a high level of test security. Many testing irregularities can be prevented through active monitoring. Active monitoring means moving about the testing area to ensure students do not have access to unallowable materials. Active monitoring means being engaged in and alert to student behavior. Active monitoring involves observing students during breaks from testing. Active monitoring ensures that results are meaningful and valid. Active monitoring involves moving about the testing area to observe student testing and discourage student cheating. Test administrators do not have to be moving about the testing area all the time. The amount of movement needed will depend on the characteristics of the testing environment and the number of students in a room. Remember that testing irregularities and violations can take place in a very short amount of time. Therefore, test administrators must remain alert throughout the entire test administration. Consider active monitoring for these testing situations: an individual administration, a computer lab with 15 students testing, a class of 20 students, 6 students in a small group administration. Which testing situation would require less movement around the room on the part of a test administrator? A small group or individual administration will not require the same amount of movement from the test administrator that would be necessary in an administration with 15 or 20 students. Active monitoring requires more than simply moving about the classroom. When actively monitoring, test administrators must make sure that students only have access to materials allowable for the content area test being administered. For example, this may include calculators for some math tests and dictionaries for reading language arts tests. Test administrators must ensure that students do not have access to unallowable materials like cell phones and testing strategies. Active monitoring can be successfully implemented even if a test administrator needs to engage in another test-related activity, such as a brief check-in with a hall monitor. Stay engaged in what students are doing while keeping all extraneous activities brief and relevant to the test administration. Please be aware that active monitoring also applies to testing breaks. During lunch and other breaks from testing, trained testing personnel must be with students to prevent them from talking about the content of the assessment or accessing unallowable materials. Which of the following is a test-related activity that a test administrator can engage in? Sending out an invitation for a parent-teacher conference to discuss test results. Creating a lesson plan to review for an upcoming test. Briefly checking in with the hall monitor. Reading a book. It is essential to stay involved and alert at all times while actively monitoring a test administration. Test administrators should not engage in activities that may interfere with their ability to actively monitor, such as texting or any other use of cell phones, surfing the internet or any other use of a computer, grading student work, or reading. However, please keep in mind that you may contact your campus testing coordinator while actively monitoring a test administration if necessary. Remember that active monitoring means the test administrators are actively engaged in observing students' behavior at all times during the administration of state assessments. Active monitoring helps to avoid unexpected or invalid test results, nullification of students' tests, the loss of testing opportunities, possible breaches in test security, and accountability implications. Section 5. Training Summary. In this module, we reviewed what test security is and why it's important, why training in test security and administration procedures is necessary, what types of testing irregularities there are and the consequences associated with them, how to implement active monitoring strategies, and what is not considered proper active monitoring.
Last, we'd like to share 5 tips and best practices you can stick to while you complete your test administration in the spring for all your assessments for the state. And in addition, once reviewing these 5 tips and best practices, you may now sign your test security oath and send originals to the district testing coordinator. Thank you for your time.